Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the SkyBox Impact sets from 1993 through 1995. With SkyBox, they started out as a basketball set, and then in 1992 they expanded out into football, which is a very, very different market, and so the ability for them to make the transition from one type of sport to another was a little tricky. Every sport has its own distinct quality to it, the way that the sport feels, the way that it looks, the way that people interact with it, and especially the way that the shots themselves look, the action in the shots. So SkyBox had to kind of figure this out, and that was the first challenge in 1992, was figuring out how all this football stuff worked. The other thing was that they needed to create two different brands, because in basketball they already had kind of a de facto base brand in NBA Hoops, the relationship that the two companies had. But in football, they needed to be able to hit both parts of the market. They needed to be able to hit the base brand level, and they also needed to be able to hit the premium level. And with that, they made their Impact set for the basic set, and they made Primetime for their premium cards. I've already talked about the 92 card sets. Check that out if you haven't had a chance. And then I've also done a video on Premium, which is what the Primetime set would eventually become. That's SkyBox Premium was the continuation of their higher tier cards. But for Impact, they were able to continue from 1992 into 1993 with the same name. So Impact would be the name of the base brand pretty much the whole way. And just like with Primetime into Premium, they had to evolve that card because the 92 set just wasn't quite where it needed to be. Same with Impact. The 1992 set for Impact was a very basic card, an overly basic card, and it just didn't have the strength that it was going to need. So for 1993, they were going to have to fix that issue, which they did very effectively. For the 1993 release, they created a card that was still a full bleed card. It was very much just a picture of the player, but they made sure that the difference between the player and the background was kind of enunciated by having a blurred out background. Not completely blurred out, but a little kind of out of focus. So that the main player on the card was very clear and very straightforward. Up at the top, they had some ghosted in text that said SkyBox, which covered over the background, but then the player on the card actually runs over the top of it, which just helped to emphasize the player that was the center of the card. So the cards read well, but they didn't read perfectly. So they were strong, but they weren't dynamic. Down at the bottom, they had the player name in a team color, and then they also had the team logo. And the strength of the colors worked really well, kind of balanced out the card. But again, the card itself wasn't very dynamic, but it was a good looking card. So they were finally figuring out how to make the cards look good. The card back is kind of a take on 92, and it's very similar to the Premium brand. So Premium had a thinner band in the middle, this had a thicker band, and that's kind of the only difference between the Premium and the Impact for 1993. But these cards were, they were intended to be a cheaper card that was supposed to be bought more in bulk. And the big key to this was that they went with parallels. Now, all these cards have the basic matte finish that cards around this time had been having. And for the parallel, they went with what's called colors, where they added a foil text of Impact down on the bottom, and the cards gained a semi-gloss finish. So that's the way that the colors cards work. And the reason for the name colors is because the foil is different for different teams. So in the case of the Broncos here, you can see that they're in a gold foil, and with other teams they have see. Okay, so the Bears have a blue foil, and then the Bengals have a silver foil. The Cowboys and the Lions have gold, just like the Broncos, and then you got blue foil for the Oilers and for the Rams, and then silver for the Eagles, red for the Niners, and then for the parallels and the rookies, they used a red foil. So that is basically the way that the colors worked, is that there are different colors of foil that are chosen for different parts of the set. So you're not going to get a card that has one color foil and then also another color foil. They only have one color, it's different for different players or different for different teams. That's the way to think of it. And so with these parallels, it looks actually pretty cool. It's kind of sneaky the way that it works, because it's not, again, it's not really all that dynamic. This set was not very dynamic at any point, but that was never really kind of the point of the set. And then, like I said, they did do a subset, and this was Class of '83. So The class of '83 was the draft class of all draft classes. I mean, in every sport, this is the draft class that you look at and just go, man, really? It's known for the quarterbacks because there are 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks that were taken in this draft. And not just that, I mean, 2 of them are top 10 all-time quarterbacks. But what's really impressive about the class of '83 is the fact that it's really, really deep. This is a draft class that also included players like Darrell Green, Eric Dickerson, Richard Dent. Those are incredible players. And then kind of at the second tier is players like Carl Mecklenburg and Charles Mann. I mean, the depth of this draft is insane in terms of just sheer star power. And this was the 10th year anniversary, so SkyBox decided to make a little set of a bunch of the players from this draft class so that you could see them, you know, they were still playing, and so it was a cool little addition that they made. The cards are not dynamic, they just have a little logo down at the bottom, but they are in there, and it is a nice tribute that they did. And like I said, these do come with the red foil for the parallel. Then they had their rookie cards, and the rookies are done in basically the same way as the regular cards, except for the fact that the player name is in gold and running right along the edge, which does a really good job of framing the card. The players themselves, they're in their college uniforms, so this is, I've never really been a fan of it. It looks kind of cheap in a way, but you know, that's the way that they did it, and that's perfectly fine. And these also come with the red foil for the color. They also did checklists, and in this case, they did checklists with 4 teams on them, 2 on the front and 2 on the back. So that's the way that those came. Now, they did do one insert set with this set. They were very slow in getting into inserts, and in this case, it's the Kelly and Magic set. Basically, Jim Kelly selected a bunch of players, Magic Johnson selected a bunch of players, and you could see them kind of contrasted one to another. And the cards are, there technically is a front and a back. Technically, Jim Kelly's card is the front, the copyright's on the back, but they do have the numbers on either side, so you can actually flip it around either way. So if you happen to be one of those people who's into basketball players who played for one of the LA teams, you know, if you're one of those guys, you can flip the cards around and have them on the wrong side if you want. But this card gives a really good example of how the cards work, because Jim Kelly has, who'd imagined, an undersung Buffalo Bill player that he's chosen. And then Magic Johnson has, who'd have guessed, an LA Raider on his card, which is, I think, a really ironic card in that regard. But this is the way they did it. So it's basically kind of like 2 all-star teams that are paired up against each other. They also did a send-away for update cards, and this is for players who traded teams or, well, they relocated from one team to another. And in the main set, while they were positioned with their new team and the color theme on the card was the new team, they were shown in their old jersey. So here the send-away is showing them in their new jersey superimposed over what looks like a card from the main set in their old jersey. In truth, the images in the background aren't necessarily the ones on the main card, which is, I think, kind of ironic. I think it would have been a stronger thing to do to actually have the actual card from the set with the player in the new jersey superimposed on the front. But that's not what they went with. But it still looks great. The way that they did it looks great, and the vibrance of the colors on this card, which is a semi-gloss, it really makes the cards stand out well. It makes them extremely strong. So this is a great little set that they did. They also did a redemption set of the rookies. And in this case, the rookie cards are done basically the same way. On the back, it's a little bit different. But instead of having gold text for the name, they now have it in the team color, but they actually have it in both team colors. So in the set, they did like a white ghosting behind the team color name that they did. Here, they replaced the white ghosting with the other team color. So it's a neat little thing that they did in that regard. They also have the draft pick number on each card, so that looks really good. And then the players obviously are in their new uniforms. So it's a very distinct look to these cards. They look like they're rookie cards. You're not confusing them with the main set, but you're also not confusing them with the rookie cards in the set. So that was a really good thing that they did. For 1994, they needed to kind of upgrade the card a little bit more and make it just look a little bit more professional. They didn't need to make it look high-end, but they needed for these cards to actually stand out and be distinctive, because that's something that the 92 and 93 sets just didn't have. And for 94, they knew exactly how to do it. They did it right. They have the player very up front, but they basically ghosted in the whole background so that the player is just very much out front and center of these cards. And then there's kind of like a shadow that's done behind to really enunciate it. So the player is just bold in this card. And then they have the team color for the logo for the brand, and then up the top they have boxes or banners with the player name, the last name in them. So they have one banner for each letter of the player's name. So for Jerry Rice, it's very, very short. But for other places like Dana Stubblefield, it's really long. So it's interesting to see how that changes from card to card. But that's the way that they designed it. And the boldness of the colors really does a good job of complementing the player. And it also kind of frames the player so that the player is just truly front and center in this card, which makes the card look a lot better. And these cards are also semi-gloss, like the parallel from the previous year, so they look really good in that regard. On the card back, it's a lot better. This is horizontal, and the only problem that I have with it is that they played that cardinal sin of putting the stats over an image, which makes it difficult to read. And if this was the premium card, it would have been perfectly fine. But this is the base card, where technically that's why you have the card. You're supposed to get these cards in order to get all the statistics, all the information about the player. So that was kind of a mistake that they made, but it still looks really good, and that's really the whole point of this. They did not do a subset with this set, but the rookies, again, are done in the same way as the regular cards, but in this case, they're literally done in the same way as the regular cards. They didn't change anything about it. The only difference is that the name is now gold. It's not gold foil, but it is gold. So that is a distinction. And on the card back, it's really nice. They actually have the logo for the team that drafted them on it. So that's a nice little addition that is an improvement over the previous year. The checklists are basically 8 teams on each checklist, 4 on the front, 4 on the back. Not perfectly, but pretty much. And so that's kind of the way that was set up. The closest they got to a subset was they did 2 commemorative cards for the expansion teams. So the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars had just been awarded the new expansion teams, and they already had their logo and their helmets figured out. And so there are 2 cards that are dedicated, one to the Panthers and one to the Jaguars, and these are really nice cards. They are vertical in orientation. They have an artistic rendering of the logo of the helmet right in the middle, and then they have the banners for the team name up at the top, and corresponding down at the bottom is the logo that is done also in the team color. And so everything's lined up in a vertical fashion that makes it look really elegant, really clean. It's a beautiful card. And on the card back, they have the logo right in the middle of the text, which doesn't really interfere with the text. And so these cards are possibly the best cards that were done to commemorate the 2 new teams. But that wasn't the only thing that they did. They also did one hologram, now just one hologram, of the Carolina Panthers. And I guess the Carolina Panthers were chosen before the Jacksonville Jaguars, so they had enough time to do this. But this is an amazing hologram. It is done like a horizontally oriented card, and it has all the accoutrements of the card, but this is a green hologram, and it has an unbelievable amount of depth. I mean, this is a really impressive card in terms of just the depth in it. They have a football helmet for the Carolina Panthers that looks completely round. The way that you move it, it's not just sideways or up and down. This is a 3-dimensional orientation. And as you move it around, the helmet really does look completely round. So that's a huge amount of depth, and even Upper Deck would rarely get to this level. It's a great hologram. And again, they only did the Panthers, they did not do the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, they did do 2 insert sets, and the first insert set is their Ultimate Impact. And this is veterans, and the theme, they were done the same way as the regular card sets. But in this case, instead of using team colors, they use silver for the theme, and the logo for the brand is actually done as a silver foil. And the card back also has a silver theme on it. And then they did another one that's Instant Impact, which is Cards of the Rookies, which, just like in the set, they use gold. But here they also have the gold foil down at the bottom. And on the back, obviously gold is the theme. So those were the inserts that they did. They also did a send-away, and the send-away this is kind of a sneaky one, because they did a send-away for the quarterbacks who changed teams. And so that means that in the case of Scott Mitchell, he's now with the Lions, and in the case of Eric Kramer, he's now with the Bears. And so they did these cards so that you could see what their card in the regular premium set, the 94 premium set, what that would have looked like. And this is the thing that's really weird about these cards, is that they were associated with Impact. They came from Impact, but they were designed like premium. And the cards, the numbers on the card backs are not differentiated in any way. They look exactly the same. And so you can mistake the first 10 cards in the premium set for these cards. So that's a little tricky. It's something you got to keep track of. You don't encounter these cards very often, so it's very unlikely that you'll do it. But that's what this is, and it's quarterbacks who change teams. Now, they also did a redemption set for rookies, again, just like they'd done in the previous year. In this case, they have the players as their cards would have looked in the regular set, but unlike in 1993, where at least they still have the player name down the side, here it literally looks like a regular player card, and on the back, like with the quarterbacks, it has no numeric differentiation, so there's no prefix. But you're not going to confuse these cards at all, because these cards are really thick. I mean, they're not playoff thick, but these are the thickest cards that SkyBox would make until a few years down the road in '97. So these are really, really distinctive cards in that every time you pick them up, I mean, for me, every time I pick the card up, I'm constantly checking to make sure it's not two cards stuck together, because it really does feel that way. But they did do that as a redemption. But that's it for 1994. So by 1995, SkyBox decided to go away from messing around with the background, and they just did full color shots, just straightforward color shots, and they allowed the design work on the card to really carry. And for the most part, they did a pretty good job. In the case of Impact, these are beautiful cards. They really are beautiful. They just have a box down at the bottom where they have all the information that they need, and that's really all that they did. They just let that carry. And then on the card back is very similar to the previous year. It's a little bit better designed, but that's kind of about all that they really did between the 2 years. So these are good looking cards, and they did do a couple of subsets, the first one being specialists. Now these are undersung players, and I think that in all of these cases, this is the only player card that they get, which actually fits because the card back looks like a normal card back. There's no difference. But on the card front, it is designed a little differently with a little strip down at the bottom. Not a big fan of these cards, but they're there. And then they also did another subset of super sophomores. And in this case, this is an overly designed card. They get a little too carried away, a little too cutesy. It didn't really carry through as far as I'm concerned. But they did that. And this is kind of weird because on the card back, again, it looks like the regular card back from the main set, but these players already do have cards in the main set. So it's like a duplicated card back. Not quite, it is different, but it can kind of throw you off. I'm not sure why it would be, but it could. And then they did their rookies. And in the case of the rookies in this set, these are really impressive cards. The players tend to get kind of washed out in the image, but up at the top they have in gold foil, rookie, with the player popping through it, kind of like in 1993. But the big difference here is that because of the foil, it really pulls the player out, and so the player becomes very distinctive. And that one element to it is an amazing element that they did, where it almost makes the card interactive in a way. Because if you look at the middle, everything blurs together. You look up at the top, and the player just pops right out, and that's really neat. So I love the way that this card works. They have just a small area of team colors down at the bottom, which is a perfect complement, and it makes a well-balanced card. And the card backs, again, are done exactly the same way as in the main set. Now, this is 1995, and so one of the big questions in every single set is, how are you going to deal with the expansion cards? And in this case, the way that they did the expansion team cards is, for most of the sets, they were done early enough that you're seeing the players in their original team jerseys. You're not seeing in their new jerseys, and this is no different. So they basically just did a big color fade for the whole card back from white down to the team color with a black strip down the side, and that was about it. But as a result of that, this becomes one of the best looking cards for any of these expansion draft players. So it was a really neat card that they did. Very forward, very impressive, and on the card back it basically is done as a regular card back using the new team colors. Now for inserts, they did a couple of different insert sets, and the first one is Countdown. And these cards always throw me off because around this time, SkyBox had a tendency to put little paper advertisements into their packs, and for whatever reason, these cards always look to me like paper advertisements. I don't know why, but every time I look at it, to me it looks like a throwaway. And it's kind of weird in a way because I like the way that the blue foil on the text in the middle, the way that looks, but there's nothing intriguing, nothing that grabs me in any way about these cards. It bugs me. Like I said, every single time that I look at them, they look like the paper throwaways. So that's a weird thing about this set. They also did Hall of Fame, and Hall of Fame looks like it's supposed to be part of SkyBox Premium. These are very well designed cards. They have a foil over a chrome foil over the finish over the background. And the background is basically like Hall of Fame. It's all designed, and then it's cut out of the player in the middle. These cards come in horizontal or in vertical, and it's a set of players that are going to be in the Hall of Fame. But it has one distinction, because Joe Montana was in the set, but he got pulled early. And so a couple of Joe Montana cards are floating around. They're very difficult to find, but they do exist, and it makes this set not a skip number set, but it's missing one number. So instead of being a full assortment of numbers, there's one that's going to be missing, period, unless you are lucky enough to get one of the Joe Montana cards. They also did an insert set for the rookies called Same Game, More Attitude. And these are, they have a diagonal quality to them. They have a football field in the back. They have the player in their college uniforms, which makes the card kind of blah. The only good thing I have to say about this card is the raspberry foil on the embossed text of More Attitude. Other than that, it's kind of a throwaway card design to me. It's a card design that just kind of disappears, and I'm not interested in it at all. The last insert set that they did is Impact Power, and this is a set of veteran players, and it is done with foil for the entire card surface, and it is offensive and defensive players. So the power is either green or it's purple, whether it's offensive or it's defensive. And this is another set, the other set where they had a Joe Montana card and they couldn't include it. Basically, Joe Montana retired, so he was no longer part of the NFLPA, which means that now the way that the contracts work, they don't work in the same way, and that's why they had to get pulled from this set. So it's another set that's missing one card number. Now, they also did another redemption, and in this case they did it for not the whole rookie set. In fact, they only did it for a third or a quarter of the rookies. They only did the running backs here in Impact. And these cards, they look identical to the cards in the main set in terms of the design, but the images are different. So the players, oddly, are still in their college uniforms. I don't know why they did that, but the cards, like I said, they look identical in terms of the design. So unless you really memorize all the images, you're not going to notice the difference until you turn it over and look at the card number, because here the cards are all numbered number out of 8. It's an 8-card set with a title card that's also a checklist, so technically it's 9 cards, but it's all running backs. That's the thing about Impact. They did all running backs. Receivers were done in premium, but this was all running backs. And so that basically closes out everything from the set, but there are two other things that they did. The first one is a deal with Fox Sports. And for Fox Sports, they did a set where all of the announcers for the different games had cards. So every pairing of announcers had a card together, and so on the front you see the two announcers, on the card backs little write-ups about them. This was done as a complete set. But the other thing that they did was a send away for promos of their Sky Motion set. Now this is confusing because they would eventually in 1996 do a Sky Motion set, which was lenticular cards but was a very different design. And the cards that they did for these promos would be used not as Sky Motion but as Motion Vision. So it's a little confusing. These technically are called Sky Motion, but in reality they're Motion Vision cards. That's a very important distinction to make. Also, it's understood that 2 of these were available from Impact in 95, and the other one was available in 96 or something like that. Basically, there are 3 different Brett Favre cards that are done in the same way. And the cards themselves, they have 3 different images that pop up. They have no card numbers, but they have Sky Motion, the text, they have SkyBox Impact logo, and they have the NFL and Fox logo. And those come in different phases, so you only see one of them at any given time. And all 3 of the cards have them, but they're not necessarily in the same place. So the way to tell the difference, I can't tell you what's 95 or 96, I can't tell you any of that. All I know is there are 3 of them. One of them just has Brett Favre alone on the field making a throw. The second one has him against the Rams. Todd Light's actually the player who's about to tackle him, or who's positioning to tackle him. And the third one, he's playing against the Buccaneers. So that's the difference. One of them has him all alone, one of them has against the Rams, and the other one has him against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the way that these cards work is they're lenticular cards, which means that there are little pieces of image inside the card, and then you have these lenses that redirect you to different parts of the card. Most lenticular cards don't give you a lot of motion or 3-dimensionality, depending on how they do it, because you need a lot of light to be able to get all these little pieces of image. Well, what they did with these cards was they actually took away the card back so that you have light passing through the card, and it lights up the whole card from behind, and that gives an amazing amount of motion. An amazing amount of game film is what you end up with. So they're great. They're great cards. But again, these are called Sky Motions. You would eventually see them as Motion Vision, so it can be kind of confusing. But that's basically what they did for SkyBox Impact for 93 through 95. They went through an evolution. It was a pretty good evolution. It was fun to see them evolve, especially when you look at the 92 set and see what they got all the way through to the end. Starting in 96, they would kind of peter out where they got to the height of over designing, which is a whole nother story that I'll look at. But that's what this is for this segment of the story. So I hope that you were able to keep up with what was going on. Hope that you learned some stuff. I hope that you'll definitely check out the other SkyBox videos I've done if you haven't had a chance. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.